good morning, everyone. Again, welcome to the IMAGIN Webinar Series number 7. My name is Jerry Swanson. I'm on the IMAGIN Board of Directors. And today we have a presentation from the State Land Bank Authority titled State Land Bank Authority and GIS, using location intelligence to recycle land to productive use. And that will be presented by Brian McNeil, Jennifer, Quinlivan, and Brian Woodin. So before we get the presentation started, I'm going to run through a couple slides. I'd like to acknowledge our webinar series sponsors, and those are Fishbeck, Giffords Webster, and BSNA Software. So big thanks to them for the support. And just so you know, all of our webinars are usually held on Thursdays every 2 weeks from 11 to noon. And we have a couple upcoming webinars, the next one being March 4th, and that is Geodatabase Replication, Distributed or Disturbed, and that's by Pete Snyder at Ottawa County. And then on March 18th, we have another one called The Art of Integration, Elevating Your GIS Data with BSNA, and I will be presenting that. So there is a question box in the GoToWebinar, so feel free to send those in, and we will be keeping an eye on them. If they're relevant to what's being discussed at the time, I might interject in and ask the question, but if not, we will wait till the end and go through all those kind of Q&As. The webinar is also being recorded, so we will get that up on our site usually within a week or so of the presentation, as well as the slide deck. And as always, feel free to check out imagine.org for more information. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Ryan McNeil.
All right, thanks, Jerry. I'm happy to be here with Brian Woodin and Jennifer Quinlivan, our crack property information disposition team at the State Land Bank Authority. Let me bring my screen up here. All right, is it displaying the proper, get an affirmative on that? Okay, well, as Jerry pointed out, our topic is how the State Land Bank Authority uses GIS to recycle property towards productive use. Quick overview of the presentation. Just a quick intro to who the State Land Bank Authority is. Brian will then talk about data collection and creation with UAS. I will then talk about using GIS for candidate parcel identification for potential solar projects. And then Jen will wrap things up with a study of Canadian lakes.
Hey, Brian.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think you're, it looks like the presentation might be on your, kind of on the notes view versus the full screen. So I don't know if you need to go, trying to see. There you go. That works. That's better. All right.
All right. It's only been a year that we've been doing this, right? So before we talk about the State Land Bank, I just wanted to tell you where we fit in the picture of the state of Michigan government. We are part of the Labor and Economic Opportunity Department. As you can see here, the State Land Bank Authority is just one of several agencies that are incorporated into LEO. And now I'll turn things over to Brian so he can give us a little bit more background on the land bank itself.
All righty, thank you, Ryan, and thanks everybody for joining us. We're glad you could take the time out to listen to us talk about the land bank. We're a little known state agency. We were created back in 2003 through a public act of the legislature. Our mission is we're here to to create positive economic impact for Michigan communities by really moving into recycling land to productive use. Land banks, kind of their original role was a lot of serving as a repository, kind of a place to dump parcels that you didn't really know what to do with. And we're trying to move past that. We like to call it 2.0, Land Bank 2.0, into really proactively getting these parcels back into productive use, highest and best use, you know, depending on the situation in the particular location. We have the ability to work across not just government entities, but with private developers, nonprofits. You know, we sell lots to just regular citizens, people who live next door to one of our properties. Again, long-term holding or banking of properties was kind of the original mission of the land bank, and which still occurs, especially with contaminated properties and things like that. And we have short-term sales of land. We might get a parcel into our inventory, and we contact a neighbor, the adjacent owner, and are able to, you know, they're able to use that as a side lot for their property. So how do we get all these properties? Almost 2,700 that we have right now currently. Normally through tax foreclosure, so that goes through the 3-year process through a tax foreclosure system. We're also working a lot more with state surplus properties, especially with Department of Corrections, former corrections facilities, especially up in, there's one up in Grand Traverse County that we've been able to redevelop for light industrial manufacturing. We're looking at former sites in Ionia to do housing and things like that. Now, back when the State Land Bank was created, 2003, 2004, a lot of the initial batch of properties came from the Department of Natural Resources. The DNR was the principal agency working with Treasury before the creation of the land bank to kind of dispose of these properties. And we can also move through voluntary acquisitions. We can purchase properties. This kind of ties in with some of the brownfield, the 381 brownfield activities as well. Yeah, so we can look at the next slide, Ryan. All right, so gathering our data, I broke it down into internal and external sources. So these internal sources are ones that we can use as the state of Michigan, as the state of Michigan agency. The DNR has a great database. It's their LOTS system. And this picture from Alger County, it gives you details of location. You can toggle through topography, wetlands, roads, all those images to find out where these parcels are at. They have a lot of good historical documents as well, especially if it came into the state inventory through the original, through state treasury. We have historical documents showing the history of these parcels. One of the other things we have in internal sources would be the Center for Shared Solutions. They have a community parcel repository, and we can view that data through our ArcGIS desktop. And that's great for counties who don't share some of their data with external sources. We'll talk more about CSS a little bit later on. We like to give them as many props as we can. They're doing great work over there. In Alpena County, they do not have a publicly available GIS database system to access, but we can look in through the community parcel repository and see the parcels up there in Alpena County. And interestingly enough, the one that we have in this picture is actually underwater. It was a foreclosure in the 1920s, and they built a dam, and now I think the parcel is mostly mainly underwater. So we can look at the next slide. So again, here's your community parcel repository. It's a partnership between state and county governments where they exchange parcel data for high imagery resolution. And you can see that the different communities that participate in that. All right, next one. So the public sources that we use, county GIS websites are just fantastic. Since the last time we've spoken at a conference, the number of publicly available GIS websites for counties has increased by about 7 or 8, and I know more are working on getting them up and running. So those are a great resource, looking at parcel data, parcel location, and things like that. Also, county register of deeds websites, looking for historical documents. you have different levels of access. Some give you screenshots and some you can download entire documents. BSNA, we love using their website as well to get property data. I found Acre Value to be especially good in rural areas. And again, sometimes these counties that don't have a public GIS website, Acre Value has assembled a good amount of data. It's not necessarily very comprehensive. And again, it's more focused in rural areas. LARA, one of the statewide agencies, they have a database of subdivision plats. Eagle has great things in place, an environmental mapper that shows sites of environmental concern, whether it's a facility or a site, and the wetlands inventory too. And of course, who doesn't love a good Google map? Yeah, next slide, please. So using publicly available sources, we run into the age-old problem of verifying the data. Is the data accurate? How old is it? So verifying ownership records, pretty easy to do. We can cross-check multiple sources if there's ever a question on ownership and things like that. As far as imagery for our parcels, we find that sometimes you just have to go out and do a site visit. Aerial imagery can tell you, two different things. The example I've shown here is 415 East Water Street over in Greenville. When we originally got the parcel from the DNR, it showed there were bulk storage tanks on it. Looking at a Google image, there's a community garden apparently. So actually driving out there and examining the site verified that yes, the bulk storage tanks had been removed, and then the community garden had been planted on that site. So next slide. So if we can't find the data, we have to sometimes create the data. So we have integrated unmanned aerial systems, UAS, drones. I'll use those terms kind of interchangeably. We've integrated that capability now for large sites, especially where you need some more detail. Up in Tuscola County, the former DHHS property for the Cairo State Hospital, they had these old structures, resident structures, they're residential units that we had received that were on a parcel. And so from aerial imagery, you can get maybe a 2D shot, kind of a pseudo 3D from Google. So we took the UAS out there and were able to map the site out, get good 3D images and some good still shots, and take that back to the office. And then it's very useful. We had questions about doing demo on these buildings. So, how high is the fence around the perimeter? So we're able to use the 3D imagery and actually measure the fence to a fairly high degree. Next slide. Another way to do it is kind of like, this is a before and after for a window factory, a former window factory in the city of Lenin. So we can document ongoing progress of the projects. So September 2018, the picture on the left, you see the building there with the residential structures in very close proximity. And then the site was taken down, leveled out. And so I went back in January. The shadows are long, you see there for the sun angle. But you see now where the old buildings have been removed, and we can use these images for putting together site plans for putting housing on these parcels now. Next slide. So another way we can use the UAS, or we're trying to integrate the use of the UAS, would be, again, site-specific data to help with the planning and decision-making. So on the left, Osprey Court up in Marquette, there are a couple of multifamily structures. And so the kind of empty part in between those two is a parcel that the Marquette County Land Bank received. And so we took the UAS out, we did a site visit, and we were able to get DEM, get elevation models. And it's hard because I cropped out the part that shows the drop off there. On the top part of the picture, you can start to see it increasing into the blue shades, showing that there's a pretty significant dip right down there. But again, so we're out there to get a good, not just a site visit and get a good sense of the site, but again, when you're back in the office or when you're sharing with people who weren't able to be out there, you can show those this kind of imagery to help with that decision-making process. All right, next slide. So site accessibility. So Osprey Court's nice because it's got nice roads running to it. Some sites that we have, this specific one up in Hematite Township in the UP, are not as easy to get to. So when we were up there a couple of years ago, I was able to drive out to the site and kind of trounce through the woods just a little bit, but get the drone up in the air and get a good picture, a good idea of where our parcel is at. And again, it was a beautiful time of year. It's in October, and so you got the changing tree colors again. So that can be used in marketing. Which next slide is we talk about that. So we're leveraging new capabilities, marketing and communications. One of the ways is through storytelling. There's a community-driven project in Highland Park called the Avalon Village, where a resident of the neighborhood didn't like the way things were headed. So she has taken it upon herself, and with her neighbors as well, to create a space for the community. So we can tell that story. We can take some still images. We can do video roll of it. Again, and put that in marketing materials and such. Next slide, please. So now it's time for a shameless plug. I'm going to be giving an Imagine Webinar lecture April 29th, actually. So it's talking about UAS and how we integrated that and how we started the program as well. I think it's a great tool for people to have in their toolbox, but it can be good daunting trying to start a program from scratch. So I will shamelessly plug that talk coming up, where I talk about how we were able to do all these sort of things and lessons learned. Next slide. I believe, and so what becomes of all this data that we accumulate? And I will pass that off to Ryan.
All right, thanks, Brian, our drone master general. So as Brian mentioned, we collect data from a number of sources, and then we need to use that data to find a way to return parcels in our inventory to productive use. So one of the challenges that we have, as Brian mentioned, the number of sources from which we can receive property. Sometimes we don't end up having a good address. We don't have information to put that property on the map somewhere that's useful. Sometimes if we do have an address, we'll get the points on our map in our property management system, but again, the point on the map is only as good as the geocoding. So what we prefer whenever possible is to collect parcel boundaries for our properties and incorporate that into our systems so that we can better return these properties to productive use. So as I mentioned, there are a lot of open data sites out there which have helped us over the years to accumulate this body of information that we now have about our properties. So open data sites, the data sharing agreements that are made by Center for Shared Solutions through their open parcel repository project, super helpful for us. So again, if we have direct access to those parcel boundaries, we can get that right off the bat. We can get that either through the open data systems. Some don't choose to do that. So again, any opportunities for data sharing, such as the MySail program, offering imagery in exchange for this parcel data, is something that can incentivize these communities to help us get these parcels moved. So the project in particular that I'm going to talk about is the potential use of land bank properties for small scale to large scale solar development. Now, for a parcel to be considered a good candidate for solar installations, there are a number of factors that need to be taken into account. First and foremost is that site close enough to an electrical substation that it's not going to cost a lot of extra money to get the power into the grid. Next item is the acreage. Anything smaller than 5 acres is not really going to be economically feasible. Costs of scale, are what they are. So Anything 5 acres and up can work. 10 acres is certainly better. And what's interesting, and we'll discuss this a little bit towards the end of my portion, is that this acreage total can be contiguous or it can be aggregate. So we can have one large 10-acre parcel, or we can have multiple smaller subparcels that accumulate or aggregate up to 10 acres within that same 5 miles of substation. So it's an interesting way to approach the problem. You don't necessarily need to have one big chunk of empty land available. You can possibly make the project work with multiple small pieces. Also, land should be vacant. Again, we want to make sure that we're not incurring extra costs at development. And there are additional other factors, slope and aspect of the site in order to maximize the amount of energy that can be generated. So we're looking at an overview, I'm going to go back a slide, of our properties. This is our property management system, eProperty Plus. Now we're showing the 23 properties that we have across the state of Michigan, categorized by classification, so residential, vacant, improved, commercial, etc. Now I can overlay in the system a buffer layer that was generated by starting with a point feature layer of all of the electrical substations in the state of Michigan, and then creating a 5-mile buffer around those sites. So we can get a sense of where these buffers or these candidate areas for solar development are, and then compare that to where our inventory lies. So I've gone through and reduced the number of total properties by looking at the total acreage. So I put in our search filter minimum of 5 acres. So we've reduced our earned inventory from 2,600 down to 56 properties. And if we zoom in to the area, this is just downriver, Brownstown area in Metro Detroit area. We see we have a couple of candidates here. We've got, looks like industrial vacant and industrial improved. But again, not a whole lot, but we can tell from the point feature. So one of the neat things that our property management site allows us to do is to incorporate boundaries when we have that data. So we can see a little bit more about the characteristics of the site other than just what the centroid of the parcel might be. So let's zoom in a little bit more. So we can see that we've got this property here in pink, that's classified as industrial vacant. The one below it is classified as industrial improved. These are not zoning classifications, these are internal. That improved indicates that there's probably some sort of road or some other kind of improvement on the site, not that it's got a structure necessarily. But we can see that we've got 2 potential sites. This one here is on the top is about 26 acres or so, one below slightly less. Both are possible candidates for solar development. Looking at, excuse me, at the property condition, we see that there's possible contamination here, which one of the aspects of that make the State Land Bank Authority unique when it comes to redevelopment is that properties that are in our inventory are automatically classified as brownfield eligible. So in this case, the property does have contamination on it, so it would certainly be something that would be eligible for brownfield remediation. Excuse me. So again, just wanted to talk about the value that we've gotten from the MyCell program. We've had been working with Everett and Uri for a number of years now, incorporating that data. They've brought a lot of value to partners across the state by offering this high resolution aerial imagery in exchange for that data. So if there are any of you out here who have not already been preached the gospel of MyCell, I'm here to encourage you to reach out to that team and play along. This is a bit of an update from the map that Brian showed earlier. So it looks like they've been busy, and we're pushing most of the state towards blue here. So most of the counties are already participating. Not all of that data has hit the systems yet. So for example, Iosco County, this morning, I received word of all the properties that we'll be taking in Iosco. We don't yet have that spatial data available, but one day soon we will. So those properties will be transformed from points to polygons sometime in the near future. Just to give you another glimpse at the MySail program, here are the years of imagery acquisition. So they do rolling through regions of the state. So in the southeast, that's the most recent acquisition. Partners in all of those counties will have access to some other projects that are ongoing or are otherwise finding their way down the pike. We at the State Land Bank Authority are going to be the administrators for the LEO, that's the Labor and Economic Development Department. We'll be the administrators for the LEO site. So again, LEO incorporates a number of different divisions, of which the State Land Bank is one. So we're looking forward to getting that up and running and using that as a tool to help us collaborate with internal partners. So working with our fellow agencies, the Eagle and DNR and other state agencies that already have data available, will be able to tie in more cleanly to that information and also make that information, that spatial data, more readily available to external stakeholders. Another interesting, application that we've been discussing is using story maps and other tools in ArcGIS Online to help us communicate our message, whether that's to the general public, to talk about projects like Brian mentioned in Avalon Village, or whether that's to convey information to our board of directors. We have a lot of projects across the state that definitely benefit from having spatial data at your fingertips when you're discussing it. So that's a project that we're looking forward to developing. Same with conveying information to the legislature, so we can try to get more funding to support the productive work that we're doing. Finally, the ongoing efforts of supporting our disposition and development teams is a major role that the GIS team plays. So as I mentioned, one of the primary tasks is to get our properties on the map. So new properties coming in from tax foreclosure, it's that time of year. We just, as I mentioned, received deeds today. So that's a big part of the property analyst's job, getting that information in the system. And then finally, what I'm very excited is that eProperty Plus is going to start supporting the ArcGIS API, so we can now connect our eProperty Plus database system to sites like, or sources like the Parcel repository, so we can extract attribute data in addition to the spatial data and get that information in the hands of property analysts who need to make important decisions about returning properties to productive use. And one of those property analysts tasked with these important jobs is Jennifer Quinlivan. So Jennifer, I'm going to pass the mic to you so that you can talk about Canadian lakes.
All right, hi all. Jennifer Quinlivan. I work hand in hand with a lot of the communities across the state, mainly tasked with the sales of the properties or returning those properties back to proactive reuse. And in one of those cases that we're using a proactive approach is the community of Canadian Lakes up in Mecosta County. This is a unique area. It is comprised of a couple different townships, and it would be east of Big Rapids and west of Mount Pleasant. And this is an ongoing collaboration and so ongoing is big because I actually just came from a meeting with the community of Canadian Lakes, the association, where we're trying to figure out what to do with our properties in that area. So I'm going to give you a background, kind of what has been happening with the community, why we have so many properties there, and how we're working together, the steps we're taking, there's strategic steps that we're taking, and then the use of GIS as we move further in that strategic process. So you can see just by this that it's a small area. The area is 10 square miles, has population currently of about 2,500. It's not huge. Move on, if you want to move on to the next slide, Brian. This is just one of their slogans is, "Who says you can't have it all?" And in the past, this area has been focused on residential with recreational benefit. It's an unincorporated community, and it started in the 1960s with multiple master deeds, actually 17 different zone communities, 55 different subdivisions, which, if anyone's a planner out there, is kind of a nightmare. And it's one of the largest private housing developments in the county. There's approximately 5,400 platted parcels, of which the state of Michigan, the land bank, holds almost 700 currently. In the 1960s, it was marketed to influential communities in the Detroit metro area. There's approximately 20 different water features between lakes, rivers, wetlands, creeks. There's 5 privately held beaches. There's 1 campground, 3 different golf courses, a small village. They even have an airstrip, and multiple privately owned green spaces. All the green spaces are privately held by the association. Currently, there's approximately 2,100 residential lots that do have structures on them. And historically, about 60 homes were constructed a year. The average age is 60, and this is the kicker. So how did this happen? How did the state land bank continue to receive approximately 70 vacant parcels a year? We hold, like I said, close to 700, and the association holds quite a few as well. So it was definitely affected by the housing bust of 2000-2008. New home builds declined from approximately 100 plus in the 200 to 2 in 2011. Foreclosures started ramping up starting in 2002 as they transferred from the county foreclosure process to the state land bank, and that continues today. Reasons behind these foreclosures and the new home start failures is obviously the decline in the market to potential community members, extreme aging out of the community. Many people, when they would pass away, the next of kin just let it go into foreclosure or sold it. Failure to attract new home buyers, developers, or single family home starts. Again, the crash, lack of traditional amenities, shopping markets, schools, restaurants to compete with neighboring growing markets of Mount Pleasant, Big Rapids, increased cost of maintaining the membership fees, and of course the increased cost of home builds. If you want to go on to the next slide, and we'll jump ahead. So currently, what do we do now? We're investing quite a bit of and will be investing quite a bit of our GIS time into figuring out how we can best recycle those properties back to productive use. And of course, that has to start with a partnership. You want to go into the next slide. And we are very fortunate to be working with the community association. They understand the problem. They see the writing on the wall that they can no longer maintain their association with, 50 on up houses going into foreclosure, or not houses, excuse me, vacant parcels going into foreclosure every year. It's just not sustainable for the association. And they can't provide the amenities to their current residents at this rate. So we've teamed up with them, and we started with a physical assessment. And the plan that we're working through is we started with physical assessment. That was completed. We've now moved into the target market analysis. The association and the State Land Bank partnered in hiring a consultant to provide that target market analysis, of which we just got the draft this week. So very exciting stuff moving forward. The next step is the two next steps are the Buildout Analysis and the Redevelopment Plan. This is where we will interact with the community to try to determine new land uses, a new projection, a new build-out strategy for the community, and then finally execute that development. If you want to go on the next one. So the physical assessment, and this is where we started. This step, we identified our inventory and in conjunction with the association's inventory. What was their data? What did we have on the data? And other publicly owned information that we could gather to start analyzing the in-house data that we had. The next part is the target market analysis, which we commonly refer to as a TMA. And this is identifying the current and potential market for Canadian lakes. It's analysis of who's buying the property, what are they buying, where are they buying, why are they buying the property, and when and how are they purchasing the properties. This will all go into our strategic analysis and development. You want to go into the next slide? And of course, we'll be using GIS. So in this slide, this is just showing an overview of Canadian lakes. The parcels in red, those are all our state-owned parcels. And you can see a lot of them are here, there. There's no real identifying markers other than these are the ones that have gone into foreclosure, and what do we do with those? It's quite impactful when you see it, how much there is. You can say we have over 600 properties, but what does that look like? And it's really impactful when you see this, and we can start building off of that. The next slide. So we took that information, what we held, and then we put it in conjunction with what the community holds. And you can see in the yellow, those are large areas of green space that they hold and how that impacts. In addition, we overlaid that with wetland information. This will all go into determining what we end up using those properties for and land use moving forward. Is this going to be a property that we can market for development, or will this have to be perpetually in green space, and how that will affect the association? Maybe those are now green space corridors to access additional amenities such as a new trail system, waterway access for kayaking, which they don't currently have. How does that impact private and public use? And are we missing a market with public use? And this, the next slide. This is just a zoomed in view of those inventory analysis of what is a buildable site. And again, you can see in green, those are state land bank parcels. The blue shows wetland overlay, and the yellow parcels or cream colored parcels are owned by the community. And those are quite large areas where current residents have the ability to access amenities such as the golf course or the waterways. And next slide. So this, hopefully, when we have another webinar, I'll be able to give you an update of the maps that we create based on the target market analysis that we just got. We're really excited about that to identify land use in our strategic planning. That we feel is going to take quite a bit of time, so maybe next year we'll have some more information and new GIS maps based on our community involvement, community analysis, and getting really into the nitty-gritty of land use planning, which is kind of my background and forte. Next slide. So this is the next part, thank you. So this is the buildout analysis. This is how we ongoing will be using GIS to support. The buildout analysis begins after the TMA, and the goal is to estimate and determine the amount and locations of development for the community. We'll look at local planning. How does Mecosta County, Morton Township, the Canadian Lakes, their 55 different subdivisions and zoning within the community. How does that work? What we can do? Do we need to address different aspects of deed restrictions and develop that property maybe for different use than what has been? Maybe based on preliminary data, we may be looking at this community as no longer a residential community with recreational benefits, but more of a recreational community with residential. So different way of looking at it, and that's what would happen in the build-out analysis. And also, looking at their redevelopment of their master plan, multiple master plans, I should say. Next slide. So this slide here, this would show kind of what a TMA and what a build-out analysis. Since we don't have that currently for Canadian Lakes, I use examples of what a land use analysis might look like, an overlay, and how we would use that with GIS to determine that different areas of zoning and eventually marketability. And then the slide over here is elevation. This would help us to realize the potential in the community and market that strategic development to developers and single family people looking to put in single family, whether it be cottages, cabins, the traditional single family residence, and where that makes the most sense. Next slide. And hopefully, once we get to the marketing, we'll be using GIS story maps. This is just an example of a GIS story map and how I can definitely see this being used when we expand or look to expand the recreational benefits of the community. This would probably be used both in-house and outside. And again, this is the redevelopment plan and how do we execute. Both of these steps, I envision using quite a few more GIS maps and the GIS capabilities. And lastly, as we finish it up, I don't have a completion date for this. but we are working, and I'm just excited that we're through our first 2 phases. When I came on in 2017 with the State Land Bank, it was very daunting to find out that I had 600 properties to sell in this small development, rural development in mid-Michigan. And I'm very excited in 2021 to be well on our way to getting a plan for development to benefit that community and its current residents and future residents. So hopefully in a few years, I'll be able to report back to you with a completed case study. And that's it.
All right, thanks for that, Jennifer. We appreciate the insight into the Canadian Lakes community. As you can see, we've put our contact information up on the screen. We will be sharing the slide deck after this is all put together, so that will be made available for anyone who's interested. And now, if there are any questions, we'll be happy to address those.
Yeah, thanks, Brian, Jennifer, and Ryan. And yeah, feel free to submit some questions in the question dialogue there. And I just have a general question to start. I'm not totally familiar with all the capabilities of the land bank, but in the case of the Canadian Lakes, could a private citizen just outright buy one of those state-owned properties directly from the state, or does it have to be transferred back to the county, or how does that work? I mean, could I go down there and look at those properties to purchase?
We would encourage you to go buy many properties. We'll sell you lots of properties in Canadian Lakes. Yeah, no, and again, as part of Jennifer's disposition, if you're looking for a second home, or if you're looking for a lot to build on in a nice area, you could definitely buy and purchase Canadian Lakes parcels. I think as we move more into looking at the target market analysis and looking at redevelopment of the area, potential redevelopment of the area, I think we're going to be probably a lot more stringent on how we sell those lots, to see if the lot the person wants to buy is going to fit with what they want their community to look like. But so there's some caveats perhaps, but yeah, these 99% of our parcels are available for the general public to purchase. We just look for, again, you have to have a use form. We don't want to just sell it and have somebody flip it, but we definitely want to get these back on the tax rolls in the best way possible. Yeah.
Cool. It looks like there's a question about, this is maybe regarding the MySale. So for getting the updated parcel information from counties, is that something you're getting annually? So, or is it dynamic enough where as sales are happening, or, I guess they're just wondering how up to date is the information you're getting from all these different counties that are providing the data sharing?
That's an excellent question, which I will have to respond with, and I'm not sure. I suspect that they do annual attribute updates. The SEV and things like that might change. I assume that there's also a spatial data update at that time as well, in case there are any splits, combines, additions, what have you. But truth be told, I can't say what that refresh period actually turns out to be. Well, like I said, I suspect it's on the annual basis, and if nothing else, most of these data sets have been shared in the last year or 2 or 3 years. So, even if that information isn't updated on a regular period, it's at least something that isn't, we're not digging back into the 2000s for this data.
Right. Yeah, I know for the city, we get annually, all the splits and combines from the county. And even though we're maintaining our assessing database, there could be splits that are purchased, but every year we get that updated parcel layer from from the county. So that's probably how it works. I see one more question about this is about the drone. So when you're up in the rural areas, especially up in the UP, are you able to, like you mentioned, you were hiking into the woods? Is it get difficult up there when you're for access? I know the drone, there's regulations with line of sight and such, but or I guess what's some of the challenges up there?
Yeah, absolutely. We've only been up to the UP once. Hopefully we'd like to get back up there again in the next year or two to talk with the communities up there. With the parcel there on North End Road, I had to park along along the highway, the M Road, and kind of hike in on a little bit of a two-track. It wasn't, I don't want to say I was out in the backwoods too much, but it was a walk in there. And then getting the drone up there was pretty easy. There was a clearing. But again, following all the rules and regulations, you can do a lot of your pre-mission planning. I looked to make sure, of course, I wasn't going to violate the airspace rules. There were no restrictions up there. Again, it was pretty rural. I was far enough away from everything to where I still filed a flight plan with Lance. I always do an authorization whenever I fly, whether I need it or not, just to have that record. But up there is pretty easy, yeah. I think getting it up in the air and then just trying to find the parcel was kind of tricky. And then on that same trip, I was out at an old, fascinating old abandoned mining facility. Again, we had parcels up there, which was actually undivided interests of these parcels, which was even more confounding. We've never ran into that before. But again, there I had to park kind of off the side road and kind of walk in a little bit. Again, being mindful of private property and things like that. So, staying to where I was still in a public space, but then getting the drone up in the air to go find out where our parcels are located.
Cool. And I guess I have one more question, and I think you mentioned in the beginning, but I know up here we did have what was it, Pugsley facility, the correctional facility, and that recently, right, was able to I think went out to bid or something, and there's going to be some. I know they were trying to get a space kind of facility up there, but I know that there was some. I saw that in the news recently, so that's pretty exciting.
I know there's talk of commercial space launch facilities and stuff up there, and this may be a command center for that or an integral part of that. Again, a lot of moving pieces. It's a lot of stuff going on, but we're excited that it's moving. At least it's going to get back on the tax rolls and be a benefit. Again. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's it. I'm going to go ahead and go over a couple more slides on my end, and then we'll wrap it up here. If anyone has any questions, again, feel free to pop them in. And again, this presentation will be uploaded onto our site as well as with the slide deck. And just want to mention our sponsors again for the webinar series: Fishbeck, Giffords Webster, and BSNA. So again, thanks for the support. And we do have some upcoming webinars. On March 4th, we have the Geodatabase Replication Distributed or Disturbed by Pete Schneider at Ottawa County. And then on March 18th, Art of Integration, Elevating GIS Data with BSNA, presented by Jerry Swanson at the City of Traverse City. So thanks everyone for your time today, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.